Hi, everybody. I'm going to just do a quick screen share here so that we can get started. Hello, my name is Marianne Snow, and I'm so happy that you came to join us today for today's briefing. This is a weekly executive briefing that we're holding because of the extraordinary circumstance that it happens to be upon all of us with the coronavirus and the COVID-19 circumstances that are happening around the world right now. Because we work with organizations that have dispersed teams, we have a lot of experience with remote work and a lot of experience with folks who have to work in dispersed teams. So we work with many organizations who deal with this on a routine basis. Because we have this expertise, we've been called into many conversations to talk to people about how to connect groups, how to organize groups, and how to help our fellow colleagues and teammates and just global citizens who are managing very difficult circumstances right now. We've been doing a weekly briefing series that is sponsored by the Remote Nation Institute as well as Sophaya, and we are presenting this with our very good friends, the Microsoft Teams group, and the Teams group has helped us to be able to use Teams as an opportunity to show you some of the things that you folks are going to be dealing with on a routine basis. This is the 6th of the series, and today we're going to talk about different techniques that you can use to get your remote team on the same page. We're going to talk specifically about operational approaches that drive a remote team and drive that remote team apart, different techniques for nurturing team cohesion, and then also different ways that you can use your a role as a team leader to be able to move things forward and really make sure that you're doing everything you can do as a role model to keep things on track. So one of the first things that we're absolutely saying to anybody who is engaging in the current circumstances, please don't mistake this for remote work. This is not remote work in any way, shape, or form. This is crisis working from home. Remote work is a powerful and legitimate business strategy, and we know this because we've worked with lots and lots of organizations over the years. We've been working with remote teams and dispersed teams since the 90s, and we understand how it can be used for business advantage. What's happening right at this particular point in time is disorienting, it's isolating, and quite frankly, it's exhausting. Not only the people that are involved with this circumstance, but it's just exhausting for anybody who's associated with these particular environments. And part of the reason it's exhausting is because the reality is that for many of our clients who have been dealing with this for the last 6 weeks, they're tired. They're tired, they're distracted, they had childcare issues, they've been trying to manage daycare and homeschooling and bad internet, no haircuts, and a feeling of isolation. They're disconnected from their neighbors, from their communities, from their families, extended families, as well as their colleagues. There's way too much screen time because either they're spending a lot of time on the computer with all of the text channels, the digital channels such as email and instant messaging. Maybe their companies are using forums like Microsoft Teams, or they're using forums like Slack or other things. Maybe they're engaging in video times, but what's happening is that people are feeling so desperate that they're now scheduling back to back video and audio meetings that are leaving people just completely exhausted by the end of the day. And it really feels for many people like there's no end in sight, absolutely no end in sight. So there's a little bit of despair. The groups that we're working with, the organizations that we're working with, are finding it really, really hard to stay motivated. They're forgetting what day it is. They're forgetting what time of day it is, and certainly they're struggling not with some of the logistics, because some of the logistics have actually sorted themselves out. But what they're doing is they're really kind of struggling with the fact that there's uncertainty. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. No one really knows how long this is going to last. And so I'm putting this context out to you because I want to make sure that you distinguish between a normal remote work situation versus what you're tackling today. Now, one of the big pieces of information that we truly wanted to share today is we've been working with a whole myriad of organizations that very much have been really thrown for a loop by this. They did very little remote work. They didn't have a lot of an organized, dispersed work plan. And one of the things that they're discovering in this process is that there are very specific operational approaches that are, quite frankly, dividing their teams rather than uniting their teams. And I want to call these out because if we're going to have a conversation about how do you get your teams on the same page, appreciate that dispersed organizations, remote organizations are positioned so that your people can work independently. They can literally remain unseen, and it's easy for them to hide. And so if you are approaching them with some of these techniques, or your organization is inadvertently engaging in some of these practices, then you really need to take a deep breath and step back and evaluate, because if you're not going through that evaluation process, then you could be inadvertently creating divisions within your remote teams, your dispersed teams, just through the habits that you're engaging in right now. And one of those is an old style leadership approach. I literally had a conversation with a team that has been working with a manager who is really struggling with this construct of remote work. And because of that, he's taking a much more micromanagement approach to how he's dealing with his folks. And so he is inadvertently creating a circumstance where his people, who are already stressed, because they're already managing circumstances that are unfamiliar, and because he's applying a micromanagement style, he is literally causing them to disintegrate in front of his eyes. He's really kind of pushing a lot of his people over the edge. And he's doing this because if he happens to send an email message, or he happens to call and leave a voicemail message and he doesn't get an immediate response, then the first thing he starts doing is he starts spamming them through every one of their communication channels, because his immediate immediate assumption is that the individual is somehow not engaging in a work priority. They're somehow not engaging in some sort of a work activity, and he has immediately convicted that individual. And so he is literally driving his team to a place where they are not only lacking team cohesion, but right at this point in time, they're literally having emotional symptoms every time they're getting messages from him, because they just assume they're going to get get disciplined in some sort of way. The other breakdowns that we've seen is if you are operating, if at this point, 6 weeks in, if you're still operating where your people are feeling there's a lack of operational support, appreciate that as a team leader, one of the things that we've talked a lot about in these briefings is the fact that team leader roles in remote teams have to shift. They have to become more mission controlled. You're the person who is a facilitator, you're a coach, you are really guiding the action, you're removing barriers. And if you have gotten 6 weeks into this crisis and your people are still trying to get work done, and they can't do that because they have basic operational challenges, then appreciate the fact that if you're not helping them, they're going to go rogue and they're going to figure out a way to operate on their own, but they're going to come up with their own protocol for things. And that's going to cause a lot of team division, because in these circumstances, what we've seen is if you don't have that centralized decision command center, and if you don't have that leader who is really truly acting as mission control and staying in touch with folks, then people are going to go off on their own, or they're going to completely disconnect. We've actually had teams of people where we've had to go out and gather folks and bring them back in under the tent because they got so discouraged that they just kind of gave up and went away. If you're not showing compassion or empathy for the team member's personal situation, we've had a lot of counseling sessions and a lot of coaching sessions with managers from more traditional companies that have really kind of struggled with this notion of how can I show my real self? How can I allow personal stuff to kind of bleed over into professional stuff? And all the boundaries have been violated here, folks. When we got onto video channels, we're in people's homes, we're seeing their kids, we're seeing their significant others. We've got all sorts of things that are happening right now. So if we have managers that we're working with who are trying to insist on old protocols that are really more related to business formality, we're asking them to take a step back away from that, because it's just impossible to execute in it, and it just creates additional stress for everybody. And then how do you accommodate the realities of crisis work at home? And we're talking about everything from latency issues, and that has to do with, can I actually execute on my job description because my internet is lousy, because every single person in my house is home and every single person is on the internet, and I've got to negotiate for bandwidth, to the fact that you might have environmental noise that you have no control over. You may have small children who really don't understand why mom or dad can't be available in a particular circumstance, particularly since that person is in their house, in their work, in their personal space. So of course the kids are like, why can't I have access? So if those are the things that we've seen that have really created a lot of barriers, let's talk about some of the techniques that we've seen that have really nurtured team cohesion and have created remarkably effective circumstances, even though the team is under duress, even though this is not a perfect work situation. And we're talking about things like very clear and consistent communication structures. And we've talked about this from the very beginning of these briefings, where we said, anytime you have a remote team, their communication is primarily through some sort of technology-enabled process. And so protocols are particularly important, and how you're using those multiple channels that are available in this technology savvy environment, whether we're talking about internet, whether we're talking about cell phone use, whether we're talking about texting, instant messaging, shared work platforms, virtual desktops. It doesn't really matter. It's like whatever those protocols are, if you took the time to put them in place, they're paying you dividends now because people are getting more used to them. They're getting used to the tools that you've implemented, and those communication protocols that were established that allowed for the easy flow of information, not only down and throughout the team, down into the team itself and throughout the membership, but also from the membership right up back up to the leadership team, so that you have some sort of a sense of, at any given point in time, what the pulse is of your organization. And this is very, very important. We're seeing people relaxing workplace rules to accommodate personal situations and also environmental intrusions. And this is everything from senior leaders acknowledging that this is an extraordinary circumstance. We had a situation just recently where we have an individual who is a senior person in the organization. He never shows up in anything other than perfectly coiffed and perfectly prepared for that professional setting. And he's been dropping in virtually on a video chat to different divisions within his organization. And he's kind of scruffed up, hasn't had a haircut in a while, is coming in his sweatshirt. And people are, they find it endearing. They're finding it endearing because he is sending a strong message that this is an extraordinary circumstance, and we can get through this, and we can get through this together. These are examples of different things. I've got one senior person who has a national organization, and what he's doing every day is he's doing kind of an Instagram post of himself holding up a little sign as he is kind of growing out his beard. I have another colleague from one of our clients who is a senior team leader. She's got a big organization, and what she's doing is she holds a morning meeting where she's essentially having clarity breaks with her people, and she is sending out notices throughout the day to remind people to take a clarity break as well, just to kind of check in with them and to let them know that it's okay to take a breather, but it's also okay for them to stand up from their desk a minute and get away from that screen for a second. The more that the leadership is attuned to the team mood, teams are getting discouraged. I literally was moderating a town hall forum for senior executive. He's a physician of a large physician organization in the New England area. We had 165 people on the call, and he is very well aware. He has been actually rounding in different areas to just come in and meet his people virtually, check in on them and see what's happening. And then he's doing weekly town halls to bring everybody together and keep them up to speed. And the more that we're acknowledging that this is an extraordinary time, and it requires special approaches and those special accommodations. And so when you're working with the leaders in your organization, or you're working with the managers, supervisors, or even individuals at the individual team level, don't try and make this normal. It's not normal. There's nothing normal about what's going on right now. And so the big feedback that we're getting from all the remote teams that we're working with is don't be too Pollyanna. Don't be unrealistically optimistic. Be real with me, be honest with me, tell me what I need to know, because there's so much out of my control, but I need someone to acknowledge that I'm not going crazy, that this is just a crazy time. Consistency and predictability in this circumstance matter above all else, because remember, your people have been completely thrown out of their normal and natural routines. So the more that you can create routines and rituals that people can count on, the more that you're doing things not only one-on-one, but also as a group. I mentioned to you the town hall situation. I will also say that we're helping people with virtual conferences. We've been polling our clients and our customers that we work with to find out different ways that they're using. I was talking to someone just the other day who used their business credit card to have lunch delivered to their entire team that is all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and they're all having a virtual lunch together. If you're in the same time zone, this might be possible. If you're working on an international team, we have some folks who are working in international settings where they've got folks under extreme geographies with lots of time zones and lots of cultures. They're comparing notes about how's everybody doing with their family? How are they entertaining their children? Because while they might all speak different languages and they have different cultures, there are global themes that you can use, that you can draw on, which will level the playing field for everyone and really indicate to people that you understand how far humanity is stretched at this particular point in time. And I think this is important because you need to build in decompression time. Stop. We're across the board right now saying to people, stop scheduling back-to-back screen meetings, because screen time, which in the best of times for those of us who are quite busy, is always kind of a challenge. But in these particular circumstances, people are feeling so in touch with their devices that they can't unplug. And so if you don't build that decompression time in and you don't stop scheduling those back-to-back screen meetings, then this is unsustainable. Remember, we're only 6 weeks in. It is quite possible that for many of us, this will continue for a good long time. And so the more you can really start to think about health and wellness at this moment and getting people into some sort of a routine, inserting that combination of one-on-ones as well as the group interactions, because the one-on-ones allow people a private opportunity to tell you about a loss that they've suffered. We are working with groups that literally are manning critical care units for COVID patients, which means they have literally been with patients when they've passed away. They're watching their colleagues get sick. In different areas outside of healthcare, we're looking at folks that feel the loss of their just daily process, where they're feeling the loss of their colleagues. They might have had a loss of a loved one, or they might have an income loss, or they have a loss of freedom. They can't go outside, they can't travel as widely as possible. So people are very, very emotional right now. And so it is the individuals who are attuned to this, who are really helping their people out, that are going to be the ones who are going to be able to bring their people back to normality faster, because there's trust that's been built. We have to let life interrupt business sometimes. And this is an important component because, nobody has been to a meeting recently where where there hasn't been some sort of a life disruption. And whether this is something as simple as a child who needs to sit on their mom's lap or their dad's lap for a period of time, or whether it's an environmental circumstance, or somebody who wanders through the video frame because they share the same living space and they don't have a choice. So, developing a meeting format that accommodates this. And then the other thing that we're coaching our people on is how to moderate these types of forums so that it not only is less chaotic, you have people invited into a conversation and out of a conversation. One of the reasons we're using Teams as opposed to a webinar platform is so that you can become familiar with these types of platforms and you can experiment with them. But we're also asking folks to include personal check-ins in their agenda, and then sticking to the schedule as much as you can. So if you're going to have some sort of a weekly meeting, make it the same day and the same time. We've got colleagues and clients that are having daily meetings with their teams. For some folks, we know some folks doing it at 8:30 in the morning. We know some people who are doing it at 4:30 in the afternoon. And we know some people who are doing it at lunchtime because that's a more convenient time because they're dealing with more time zones. So accommodate based on what's appropriate for your schedule. It's all about continual, consistent contact. And when you're thinking about how do you keep your team together, being aware that the telephone game is in play. So how do you keep the message as simple and straightforward as possible? How do you tweak your communication protocols so that they're continuing to improve? Everybody is aware that we got into this in the worst way possible. It just was foisted on us. Now, if they're seeing a gradual improvement, if things are getting better, if things feel more normal, if things aren't quite as disrupted, that makes people feel more comfortable. And then how do you create themes and construct messages that fit that theme? So, one of the things that we've seen is, people will actually work with their teams on a weekly basis and kind of focus on, this week we're gonna figure out video conferencing and we're gonna try it. We're gonna do a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about how to moderate in these forums. We're gonna talk about how the tools work. We're gonna talk about the technology. We're gonna talk about all of those things. And so by really kind of tackling things in a theme-oriented way so that you have a lot of activities that are happening that are associated with a business objective or a purpose. And then sometimes it's mental health, and sometimes it's acknowledging the team, and sometimes it is thinking about what our next move is. How do we plan as a group to kind of think about how we approach what's coming next? So, how do you use every channel at your disposal to support that core message, the business objectives, but also if you are working on a particular business objective that is really kind of theme based on a period of time, then how do you take all of those channels and actually use all of those channels so that there's some coordinated effort? If you haven't added video by now, do it. People need to see each other. I've never seen folks so in need of a hug. And that's the only way I can describe it to you. Even hardcore introverts are very interested right now in getting back in contact with people. And so the more you put body language in, the more that you have facial expressions, the better off people are going to be. And then how are you as a leader coaching, advising, and encouraging your team to continue to improve their skills, particularly their communication skills in these environments? And that's your role, folks. If you want team cohesion, you are a linchpin in this forum. It is the leaders who are acting as mission control, even if you're not a natural delegator. I was talking this morning with a group that people were admitting that delegation isn't their natural course of action, but we've been working on this with this particular team, and now this individual is getting is deputizing other people, having them help with things, and this is making a big difference in her team's morale, because people are feeling more involved and they're feeling connected, but the pressure is off of her to be the only one. If you're mission control and you're moving barriers out of the way so that people can move forward, if you're communicating and you're encouraging other people to communicate, if you have clarity of message, and you're also providing coaching and counseling and advising to your folks, and you're doing it in a way that is really creating a lot of trust with your group, this is going to make a big difference to you in the long run. It is the team members who are watching your role modeling. It's the team members who are taking cues from you. You're setting the tone. How are you showing integrity? How are you doing all the things that you need to do that will help your people really feel connected, but part of something that's meaningful, but also that acknowledges them and acknowledges just this extraordinary time that we're in right now. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to end my remarks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions from the group right at this particular time. We've got a few people out there who are with us today. We're really glad to have you. And if you want to indicate that you have a question for me in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and tell me you got a question, then I'm happy to take a question. Anybody out there with a question today?
Yeah, I have a question. One of the things that you mentioned was, what if the family's all home and everyone's using all the Wi-Fi, and so that makes everybody's computer go very slowly? What are managers doing as a way of dealing with that? Do you know? I mean, that, and then, I mean, are they asking their people to work at different times, or how exactly is that going? Do you know?
And is this Carrie? Hi, Carrie.
Oh, hi. Yes, this is Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. I would say all of the above. Here's what I'm seeing. First, I'm seeing that a lot of times what folks are doing is they're reprioritizing. They're working with their individual team members to figure out ways for their team people to be able to get the best productivity given their particular circumstances. And, part of this has to do with what we talked about at the very end, which is, if there's good trust between a leader and their people, then their people are actually going to fess up that this is a problem. And they're going to go to their leader and they're going to acknowledge this, and then they and their leader work together to try and figure out the best solution. Sometimes it's a negotiation with the folks who are living in your space. Sometimes it's a negotiation with the team leader themselves. Sometimes it's a negotiation with the rest of the team. But one of the things that we're absolutely advising all of our people right now is to make sure that you're keeping in pretty constant contact with your folks, so that if you're noticing someone's lagging behind on a deadline, or they're not delivering their natural performance, or somebody's behavior has changed in some way, as a leader, we're saying to people, reach out to those individuals and do a pulse check on that individual, because maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're worried that they're going to get in trouble, or maybe they just don't know. They absolutely don't know what to do about it, and they're a little bit worried about talking about it out loud in front of other folks. And so if you're noticing a change in people's behavior, please do reach out to those folks so that you've got a pulse on what's going on with your folks. I see Bobby Carlton. Yeah, bandwidth for everyone. Yeah, this is going to have long-term effects, folks, and I think there's going to be a huge push for improved broadband across the spectrum. Other than South Korea is a country that has huge internet capabilities with a lot of broadband, very modern internet network, and I think we're going to get a push for that in our world too.
Yeah, I'm also actually wondering, this is Bobby, Marianne, just to follow up on that conversation. I'm wondering if some companies are asking their people to check and see if they can get more bandwidth into their homes, if that's a business expense type thing.
It's interesting. I was actually just talking with a client of ours that is a national insurance company, and I was talking with them yesterday. We were having a conversation about this, and one of the things that we were talking about is, what does a company pay for versus what are they asking their people to pay for? And this is an organization that we've been working with for almost a year to deploy a remote work program, a planful, organized remote work program, and this was a point of discussion. And my client and I were talking yesterday about the fact that right at this point the company is just like, they're not even questioning it. If they've got people with business critical functions that need to be done and they're having bandwidth problems, they're telling those people to go and increase their plans so that they can eliminate some of the latency issues so that they can get that stuff done. So companies have a much better appetite right now, Bobby, for taking on that expense. And they were kind of quibbling about it before, where they were saying, geez, why should we have to pay for it? Now I'm seeing there's a lot more appetite for that.
I'm also wondering if we can get some of the providers, it's like right now there's a lot of bandwidth sitting in an office that's not getting used.
Yeah, it's there's all sorts of very, very, very interesting circumstances right at this point in time. I know that there has been some big push for, like, right at this point in time, AT&T has given all healthcare workers free cell service for a month. So anybody who is a demonstrated healthcare worker can get their cell phone bills forgiven for a month. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on the utilities in general right at this point in time to contribute so that things get better for folks.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions for us today?
Hey, Marianne, it's Michelle. I wanted to ask of the instance where you talked about maybe leaders who are causing more stress because of some of their behaviors. How has it come up that you can bring that up in a safe way that your manager would be open to that, not defensive?
Yeah, and Michelle, that's a great question. We do it a couple of ways. One is sometimes when we're working with the organization directly, we've actually mediated for the team. So because we're not working directly with that person, we've kind of pulled them aside, and we've given them a safe opportunity to have that conversation back and forth. We've also worked with HR departments and employee relation departments to provide coaching and different types of guidance for individuals who are managing teams and supervisors. I was actually on a call with a major university today because I'm doing an emergency session with them early next week to talk to their managers for how to do virtual performance reviews. And one of the things that came up, Michelle, was, geez, managers are very reluctant to engage with their people in these environments, and what are we going to do? And I would recommend that I'll tell you what I told them, what I told the HR group today. I said to them, I think we need to really kind of stress this is an extraordinary time. And if we don't allow our people to have some sort of contact, that could be a problem. I know that employee relations departments in all the companies that we're working with are on heightened alert because they're getting they are certainly getting a lot of feedback from folks who are in these teams at the heightened stress levels. And so employee relations are sometimes getting involved with those things as well. But if you know somebody who has influence with your boss, if you know somebody that they will listen to, that you can contact and have a quiet conversation with off to the side. We've also advised people to see if there's somebody of influence who doesn't necessarily work directly with the team, or someone in the team who the leader is more disposed to feel comfortable talking to. Is there a person of influence that you can use as an intermediary?
Great, thanks.
Good luck. I know it's a really difficult circumstance right at this point in time. I've had some very emotional conversations with folks who are in very stressful situations as a result. So I hope things work out for you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions for us today? Great. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'm going to encourage you to come back next week. We're going to continue these briefings. We actually scheduled them for 10 weeks, and we've posted for 10 weeks, but we have had a very good response to this. So we're committed to coming here on a weekly basis, sharing tips, and also just really kind of talking to you to help you through this crisis period, because again, this is not a normal remote work situation, and we are in extraordinary times. So if there are ways that we can help you out, we are very happy to do that. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and please be well. We hope you have a good week and hope to see you back next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.